So one of my favorite parts about this homesteading lifestyle, and something we talk about a lot here on the show, is the parallels between our modern homesteading lives and the homestead lives of those 100, 200, 300 years or more in the past. And of course, us today, we have more technology and more creature comforts, but there's still such a wonderful familiarity with what we do now in 2024 and what our ancestors did. And I think it brings me a lot of peace to know that things change, but they don't always change as much as we think. And so one link that is so fun that I have discovered when looking at what people like us, people who were tied to the earth and its rhythms and its seasons, and one thing that people like us looked to in the past was the Old Farmer's Almanac. And the cool thing about this publication, it has been around since 1792, and it is still being published today. And you've probably seen it around. You may have seen it online or seen it in stores. But I am so excited to have the 14th editor-in-chief in the history of the Old Farmer's Almanac joining me today. And we're going to talk about why this publication is so unique, so special. And also, we're going to pull out some of the tips that they share for gardening with your weather, how to garden by the moon, which I'm really excited to dive into because I don't know a lot about that. But it's going to be a really awesome tie to the past. So welcome, Carol Conner. I'm so excited to have you joining us. I know you're not only the editor-in-chief, but you also are a gardener and you're very familiar with the agrarian lifestyle on your own time. So I'm excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me, Jill. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, so I was reading in the latest edition of the Almanac, I think it was the editor's note, and I loved this piece. I'm just going to quote it here. It says, "As centuries pass, we note the steadfastness of readers' interests. Articles in 1825 concerned raising calves, growing asparagus, and keeping a kitchen garden. A century later, we described the hazards of rearing chicks, how to thwart houseflies, and the 7 best woods for fence posts. Our 2025 offerings seem reassuringly familiar. How to raise backyard chickens, grow plants from outside your hardiness zone, and garden in sync with the moon." I just love that so much because it's just the same, even though the eras are different. So I guess as we dive in, can you just give us a brief history of the Almanac? And I think it just is the ultimate of being old-fashioned on purpose. So I'd love to just know a little bit more about it.
Sure. Yeah. It's really an honor to be the editor of the Almanac, which is really about a legacy beyond any editor, really. And, we are a team, a small and mighty team. And yes, the legacy is an interesting one. Back when we started in 1792, our founder, Robert B. Thomas, there was a number of almanacs. People in their homes tended to have like the Bible and the Almanac. And the Almanac was really about how you got through your daily life, how you worked the farm. One out of every other person was really a farmer. Every person was really a farmer, back in the day. And so they were regional, like Benjamin Franklin had the Poor Richard's Almanac. And then, so they were for, just like you're saying, kind of a growing region has a particular set of needs and interests for people growing there. And that was true. But for Robert B. Thomas, he just thought, I can do better. And and his ingredients were really usefulness, but with a degree of humor, a pleasant degree of humor. And I think that's part of it. There's an aspect that we do want to be entertained while we're learning, while we're being reminded. And I don't know about you, I've been growing for so many years, and every year I need reminders,
Yes.
So it's kind of a friendly way to get that too. And I think, paying attention to what readers want is the other thing that has been characterized as our history. Back in the day, of course, people would just write to us or tell us. But now, we hear from people online, by email, by phone. And those are really valuable conversations. Heck, even, our reviews on Amazon.com are incredibly helpful. And so I think, when we think about over time, that's a constant, is just paying attention to what readers want. And what they want is sometimes the same old information, and they want it, but anything newfangled as well. We're growers. We want to know what's the latest. And at the same time, we need those reminders, right? And also learning and relearning. So, and I think over time, we've been around for a long time now. We're kind of the only one with the longest published periodical in North America. And, new features every year, but also some of the same information like frost dates.
Yes.
Right? We want
And
those.
I have to look some of that stuff up, like you said, every year. Or like, how far do I plant the garlic for? I can't remember. Like, you just need that tried and true stuff, no matter how you do it. Yep.
Yes.
And I loved when I was thumbing through the digital version of the upcoming Almanac. And when will that hit? Is that out now or that out later?
Everything's out. It's in grocery stores. Okay. It's in, big box stores. It's in garden stores. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I figured as much, but I was thumbing through and I loved how the beginning was, like you said, the more up-to-date articles with the pictures and the color, but then I got to the back and it was like kind of old-fashioned type and you could just, it was those charts, and I love both. I think we need both.
Well, what you said at the beginning, I think is something next year is our sexcentennial. Well, we'll come out in the fall of 2025 with our 2026, which is our country's 250th. And, the hoe hasn't changed. The shovel really hasn't changed. The idea of having to germinate and grow and tend and water, that's all very much the same, and as you said, there's some unchanging things. And yet at the same time, we want to make sure, do we have everything we could have to tend our plots?
Yes. And I think that's truly, my audience and we talk about that so much is it is like to quote you again, reassuringly familiar that the hoe is the same and the shovel is the same and the soil is still there to grow with us. But we do have the knowledge, and it's okay to change and grow and morph as we become more aware of things. And I think that the tension of both things together at the same time is really beautiful when we sink into that. So I'm curious, how do you come up with some of the predictions in the Almanac, especially in those later pages? I just was really
for the weather.
Yeah,
sure. Again, back to the beginning, Robert B. Thomas, he was an astronomer. And so one of his major fields of interest was sun science, those magnetic storms on the sun and how they impact our weather. It's not like there's a solar flare and we have a hot summer, it's a lot more. It's about the jet stream. It's about oceans temperatures and the flow, really. And that is impacted. And so what he did was he studied that and he factored that into the same formula we use today. So it's climatology, it's meteorology, and it's this sun science. It's crazy, right? To try to predict long range weather when we barely get it right short range. And the idea is that we just have a ton of data. So the sun storms go in 11-year cycles. We're at the cusp of between 25 and 26. That's why it's very volatile. People seeing the aurora a lot further south.
Yes.
That's a very active sun cycle. It will die down. That is what's going to happen. It's happened 25 other times. So what do we know? In a year 9 of a sun cycle with these same sorts of other indicators, then we use that data with our weather team. And that's essentially the ingredients of what we do.
That's fascinating. I was wondering that because you have such a long-running publication with so much data, are you able to go back to those cycles of, okay, here's what we were looking at in the 1800s and here's what we were predicting then. And I think that's really amazing to be able to.
It is
that much.
It is incredible because, the weather's like this one thing we still can't control. And yet, whether you're a fisher, an angler or a grower or any, a stargazer, all of those things kind of depend on it. Yeah. And this idea that weather it's changing and growers know it. They know it more than anybody. That's what we hear a lot about. And as you probably know, the new normal temperatures for both Canada and the US were updated, and that pushed the hardiness zones. So maybe even where you grow, you get a few more days on either end of the season and you're able to grow maybe a few different things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of people talking right now about how everything feels different, especially this year.
Oh, yes. We talk to radio stations and people all over the country. And it's been this year for the most conversation is about these weather. It's like we're really pushing the seasons. Is this happening everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's kind of a nice segue into our first topic that I'm really intrigued by. And that is gardening by the moon. We've never talked about that here on the show. I've been aware of it in my periphery. I often hear people when we talk about planting garlic. For some reason, that one sticks to me because I'm planting garlic right now. They try to plant that in conjunction with the moon. I think some people think it's a little woo-woo, it's a little weird. But can you dive into that? I'd love to know just kind of a high level, the concept of gardening by the moon, why that's something that we might pay attention to, and then we can get into some more of the details there.
Sure. This is one of the things we couldn't do too many stories on tomatoes or gardening by the moon, to be honest with you.
You can talk about tomatoes forever.
Forever.
No one gets tired.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's kind of connected in a way, because back in the day, like, the moon cycles, the essential aspect of gardening by the moon is about this idea that the moon moves water. So you don't live near the ocean, but many of your listeners may, and we know darn well, what happens when there's a full moon and a high tide, and those things and so the concept is that there's water in the earth, right? So there's water tables, there's water in our dirt. We know we have to water our plants. And so the idea is that that water, which we can't really see, is also affected by tidal pull. And so this idea that when the moon is waxing or growing in light, that is the time to do above ground crops. This is very basic, as you said, kind of high level, because the water is being pulled up from the earth by the increasing light. And then when we get into that second 2 weeks of the cycle and the waning moon, that's when the water, the moon's energy is drawing the water down into the earth. And so root crops or transplanting or things that have their business underground, that's why with the garlic, it's like you want to set those roots. And so that's why people are doing that, I believe, in the waning moon, to do that. And so, yeah, that's the basic idea. And, from the old days, it's like anything to give you an edge, right? And this was passed down by indigenous people and, many generations of farmers before us who had nothing else to do but watch the moon and figure out, heck, my potatoes are doing better, Well, actually, that was later crop. But right. My skirrets are an early carrot. So the colonials would be growing that. But that's the idea. And so in the book, we have several ways that you can access that. And so you could look at the best days, which is kind of a cheat sheet for growing things according to the moon's phases, but also things like cut your hair for growth, castration, or, pruning for fruit production or for mowing to keep it to lower growth. And so that's really like a cheat sheet, as I said. And then we also have the actual planting by the moon phases chart a few pages later in the book. And then the third thing that we have is the frost dates. And that is, of course, often affected by where the moon is at. So you might be September 15th, I think is what we have for Casper this year for frost date for 2025. And I would have to look, but say that was during a new moon, that might affect what we would say it would be a few days either way, right? Because it might be, chillier, say. So, yes. So those things are all sources in the book, and you can find those online too. You could just punch in your zip code and get some of that with our tool. So, yeah, that's the idea. Does that make sense?
That does. I did not realize it had to do with the water, but it makes total sense.
Yeah.
That the water in the plants. Okay, that's fascinating.
And we're water too, right?
And we're water, right.
So a lot of people want to think about that, like really literally blood, yes. Our liquidity. So, you can take it in all sorts of directions, but that is the essence, is the tide.
Fascinating. And it was funny because I was just talking with my kids the other day. They said the kids at school were all acting crazy. And my son, he's heard me talk about it. He's like, I think it's a full moon, Mom, because you talk about people feel different during a full moon. And my daughter was like, come on. And we're just like, hey, the moon move. He did say the moon moves the water. So why wouldn't? So we knew that part, but I didn't think about it, that being us being water, plants being water.
Yeah.
That's such a cool connection. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to have to go check out the charts a little more in depth. I know you mentioned the above ground versus the below ground plants. Are there any vegetables in particular, or other plants that you find are maybe more sensitive, or it's more important to really pay attention to that, or that's kind of all the same?
For me personally, I have found that it makes a difference in terms of germination. Because I think that's one thing that people struggle with. Last year's Almanac, we had just a basic, here's 5 ways to germinate, because guess what? If you don't get it right, and everybody I know has had seeds fail, and by reputable companies, it's not necessarily that. So those are one of those things where I feel like it doesn't matter which day. Usually that I start to germinate, and so it's a day that I can choose. So I might look at a more favorable date. And so, but really, people, I hear the most stories about moon growers about potatoes, because that's a real underground crop. Paying attention to that, and that I think is really true for all roots. And then, I think for those who are getting a fall garden in, that can get that second growing, and we're seeing more zip codes and hardiness zones be able to do that. That's a good time to look at the moon. Kind of like I said, like, will we get an extended time to grow? Paying attention because the light and the warmth are lower. So again, giving that edge. And I think that's a good time to put it into play.
Okay, that's a good point. And I never thought about using that. Like, it's such a crapshoot for me to know when my first frost is coming. Like, some years we've had severe snowstorms. I remember September 8th a number of years ago was like a blizzard. And then, as of the time of this recording, it's October 2nd and I have not had a frost yet. And so this year I felt like so blind because I started pulling things out of my garden the first week of September because I'm like, it's coming. But I could have gotten 3 more weeks of growing out of some of the tomato plants because, it's hot now. So I never, to have that extra little bit of data or that extra little piece to watch, I think could really help a lot of folks, especially when we talk about fall gardening, which my audience and I do talk about that quite a bit. So that's super helpful.
And I was looking back at so we go October to October with our predictions, and we did say that your fall would be warmer and drier than normal. So
yeah, I've been to the
good or bad.
Yeah, I'm usually like, whining about having a short growing season here. And this year, I'm kind of like, oh, why are we so long? And it can be now.
Why don't I put kale seeds in?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm ready for fireplace and cozy nights, and I don't want to be watering this stuff anymore. So interesting. Okay, so if someone's wanting to look into this, like beginners, I'm thinking some simple steps they could take. So get the Almanac, start looking at those guides in the back, and then I'm thinking the moon cycle is a pretty wide range, and if you're trying to get crops in the ground, that's a sometimes we want to get that all done in a weekend or all done in a week.
Exactly.
So you maybe pick some to start with and then kind of branch out from there. Is that what you would suggest?
I would. I think, again, it's like, especially pick ones that you've had a little trouble with, or, you want to have an edge on, I think that's really the idea. I mean, that's why farmers started using it. It gives them an edge. They're always looking for the edge. And so, I think that's where I would start. That's where I started. And again, like germination, to me, it's like I have more choice about when. So why don't I just do it on a day where I can have a bump up on my luck,
Yeah. And everybody I've talked to this year, we've all had at least one crop that just didn't germinate. Like my cucumbers this year, I always grow cucumbers, nothing. I had to replant it 3 times. I got 2. I usually get a whole bed. So there's been a lot of weird stuff I've heard people talk. Just, I don't know what I grow it every year and it's just not going. So little edges make a big difference sometimes.
They do. They sure do.
Okay, so that's fascinating. And kind of on that same topic, I wanted to shift a little bit to just the weather challenges, especially like, you said, my fall is weird this year. Our spring was weird. The weather patterns can be so unpredictable. What advice do you have for gardeners who may be seeing frost in their area earlier or later than they expected, or heat waves that they didn't expect? Do you have any ways that we can adapt to that?
Oof, that is the reason we publish. I mean, it is just, it's hard out there, and we're seeing a lot of aberrant weather. We're seeing a lot of, I'd say overall what our weather team says is that there's more moisture overall in the atmosphere. So that doesn't mean that, we don't have a hot and dry spell in certain areas like prairies and plains. But the idea being that when it comes, it tends to be a lot more precipitation in a shorter amount of time. I mean, and it's localized, right? I mean, you're probably hearing this in your area. I mean, we've had, the kind of flooding, like we obviously storms like in Asheville area, which is, horrible. This idea of that. And what can gardeners do? Well, in some cases, there's not much you can do. But I think the idea is that hedging your bets is a great one. Diversity is the most important thing that we see in real commercial farmers. Monoculture was what people did to make money. And now that's actually a losing proposition because, like you said, one thing might not germinate. What if that's your main thing? So I guess I would say that would be my biggest advice is try out different things, and different varieties of things will do better sometimes in one year or another. So no, no monoculture.
Yeah.
I think especially for the home grower, and that you might have put in 6 apple trees or something, but again, like if you're just starting out, mixing those up, and making sure that you might have some hardy varieties. I always tend toward the heirloom. I just feel like they're disease and pest resistant. They tend to be drought tolerant. And so I think those are good varieties to give a try.
Yes, I agree. Do you have any favorite? I know that's a huge question, but what are your favorite heirloom varieties just off the top of your head?
Oh, God. We were talking tomatoes.
They asked me my favorite book. I'm like, I don't know. I like so many. But anyway,
I can only tell you the colors. Like I just go and I look at the colors of tomatoes. Like I'm like those tie-dye ones. Those are heirloom. Mm-hmm. And then it's a male name, and I can't remember, or the German golds, I think.
Okay.
Those really pretty gold ones. I had so many indeterminate volunteers in my garden this year. I just moved, so I don't know what they are.
Sure.
But those are hardy. Other heirloom varieties. There's a carrot out there. It's like a half-size carrot. What's it called? Like a darn something. They're cute as can be. I have not had great success with carrots, but those I have. So again, like going to the heirloom variety helped me. Those are some of my latest.
I love it. I think your point about the diversity and steering away from monoculture is so important. Most people listening are not commercial farmers, but I've had so many guests on the podcast where we talk about just the shift of the industrial farming paradigm and how we got here, but that is such a modern phenomenon. It's so recent that it never worked before. And I predict, here's my prediction. I think I didn't come up with this. I've heard a lot of other people say that we're at the cusp of that no longer working commercially large scale anymore.
Absolutely.
We're at the end of like, that's not going to work. That was a nice little experiment for couple hundred years, and then it's over. So I think as home growers, as small growers, we can start to adapt so much more easily. And like you said, even just fighting the monoculture on a small scale, instead of just doing one type of hybrid tomato, get a bunch of heirlooms just to see what works in your area. Because the beauty of those heirlooms, like you highlighted, is that the species are not a monolith. Like you have tomatoes that work for short seasons and long seasons, and they're sweeter and are good for canning or good for slicing. There's so much diversity there. You may be able to find one that is more tolerant to the volatilities in your area. I think it just takes that little bit of creativity to dive into that and research.
Yeah, and year to year, like especially if you're doing, say, berry shrubs or bushes, and putting in a variety that will also blossom over time, that kind of diversity. I just got a place where I lived in the former gardener put in raspberries that cover, they're still fruiting. And so what he did was he put just a bunch of varieties. And so if say something happened and it was a drought, or in the middle and they dry up, the fall ones will come in, so you're not reliant on one time or one, variety.
Absolutely. Yes. It makes so much sense. Friends, I'm interrupting this episode because I have a big announcement today, one I've been waiting to tell you about. The 2025 Old-Fashioned On Purpose Planner is here. It is ready for you to order. We wanted to get it out earlier than ever this year, so you have plenty of time to start thinking about 2025. And I can say without a doubt, this is our best planner yet. We took all the features you love from previous years, plus some things you've been asking for, and rolled them all into this edition. So the first thing you'll notice, there are tabs. Hallelujah. We have tabs for all of the months and the sections. That's been a huge sticking point for so many of you. We finally got it done. The cover is durable PVC. The paper is luxurious, if I do say so myself. It's thick and silky, and it's not going to bleed. We have monthly spreads. We have weekly spreads. We have spots for your menus, your garden, your kitchen, your animal records, what you're reading, your goals for the year, your project mapping. It's all in here and lots more. This is almost 300 pages of organizational goodness, and it will help keep your old-fashioned life on track, regardless of whether you live on 100 acres or you're homesteading in your backyard. So we have a set number of these that we have printed. We will sell out this year, so don't wait too long. Head on over to prairieplanner.com to get a full look at the inside, all the features, and to get your copy. Also, we have a special limited run of some custom planner stickers that you can add on to your order. We're selling out of these as we speak. So if you want the stickers, definitely grab your planner sooner versus later. prairieplanner.com. I cannot wait for you to try it, and definitely post some pictures and tag me over on social once you start putting all of your old-fashioned goodness inside. So I'd love to talk a little bit about cold growing. And not everyone listening is in the Arctic like I am, but I do have a lot of folks who follow me because we commiserate about living in a place that is not tropical. So what in I know you've been in the realm of so many articles and so much research with your time at the Almanac and beyond. Like, what are your favorite strategies, or what do you tell people when they're looking at plants that are cold hardy, or strategies for growing in places that are colder climate?
Oh, God, this is the question, right? I've been a New Englander for my whole growing. And so I feel the pain. I feel that. And then, as much as a warming world can be a little bit alarming, there is this thing about gardeners, like there's this little bit of us that's like, okay, I have a little more time, right, to put things in the ground. So I think, again, kind of back to the idea of what works in my area. So for us, we use expert sources like Cooperative Extension. So I was just looking in Wyoming, and I know that your listeners are everywhere, but they have a very robust site. And further, I think seed libraries are an incredible resource. So it really kind of started before the pandemic, and we started to see seed libraries and people getting really interested in this idea of giving back too. So I looked up, and in Wyoming, they did a survey, and there's all these civic libraries that are offering seeds. And it also teaches people how to save seeds on their own, which I think is really important. So again, you try some varieties and something does really well, like maybe that's the seed to save, right? And also, there's a lot of indigenous communities who knew a lot more about growing than we did. And they are bringing back varieties, and I would urge people to find those. And again, those are localized. They're going to be where you are. But if you have an active community, it's, they're rematriating species and hybrid things, back into our growing. And those are super tolerant. Those are the stocks you want, right? For extending the season, simple, inexpensive things. Row covers, right? Of course, none of us resist starting things indoors, and probably too soon. So I think, that's a hazard. And then we put them outside and they don't do well. I can't tell you how many times. Right. And so
recommendations,
really learning about hardening off. I think we think we know it, but boy, if you do it right, your plants do so much better. And I'm such a guilty person of starting too many things. And I've learned that when I do that, the most important lesson for me is to then go be good about hardening them off, putting them outside, and bringing my little babies back in, and that might take a while. I think some of the other things is just like, I've given up in some ways, and I just have grow lights, and I have to grow greens inside during the winter. I have them in the hallway at work, and you can go to your dollar store now, and they'll have these grow lights, and you throw those on a timer for, I think mine was under $20, and I just can grow lettuce in our office hallway. So to me, that's just kind of it's not really a cold weather growing. I guess it is, but it's like, don't be afraid. I mean, there's so much now inexpensive technology that is not invasive in a way, right? And it makes you feel good to kind of have that warm, lighted space and watching that green stuff pop up. So that's another strategy I use.
I love it. I just want to get off on the small rabbit trail there because I just love the picture of you growing lettuce in your office. I think more of that needs to happen. And that's a beautiful symbiotic relationship between the old ways and the new ways. What are your favorite greens to grow? Are you just doing like salad lettuce?
Yes.
Okay.
And I do little baby kales. I just bought a mesclun mix, a nice little organic seed mix, which I'm going to put in now because I feel like I did just kind of, the house, we have kind of a dark hallway. So we farmed out some things, but I have kale and lettuce over there now, but I'm going to put in a new crop of winter lettuce. So I'm very excited about that. And we just go pluck it for salads, which is great. I don't have much success with herbs. I would say so I know. And I think with this winter, what I'm going to try is, I was just reading about this on our site and it says, just pluck them now, those greens, and put them in water in your house in glass jars. And they're going to start to sprout and you can continue to grow and root those in the water. They'll be fine in the water.
Okay.
So you don't actually need to do the dirt, which sometimes I think is the issue. Like, keeping it perfect for them as well as the light is hard.
Yeah.
So I'm trying water jars this year.
I'm going to have to try that too. Because, the classic recommendation is always like start an herb garden in your windowsill. And like I've tried it for like 15 years now. And
very hard.
They stay the same sometimes they die, but I'm like, I can't do much with a basil plant that has the same 5 leaves on it for a year. Like, it's just,
no, it's not going to be pizza.
Not going to be pizza. They're like, oh, make, margarita pizza with your basil. I'm like, it has 5 leaves, people. Like,
it's going to be this big. Side pizza this big.
Yeah, no. Okay. I love that idea. And that's that creativity, I think, that just thinking outside the box. I love also what your point about the seed libraries and saving the seeds. And, the industrial farming paradigm has seeped into even the home gardening world and in the homestead world. And that, I remember growing up, my parents weren't homesteaders. They were pretty conventional gardeners, but they still had a garden. But we would get like the same kind of mass-produced seed catalog every year with the mass varieties. Exactly. And that's fine, but that's really more of like the industrial farming paradigm coming to the home garden world. And so we can, if we're going non-industrial or we're kind of peeling back those layers, it's, looking at those libraries, looking at what we're saving, seeing what your neighbors have, seeing if you can trade. And I think that's going to create that diversity that's so important, especially right now.
Yeah, I think that's incredible, actually, like just the idea that we are kind of taking back our agency, and I think it's really important. And I think that is what these seed libraries have engendered in just communities. And the other big trend that we're seeing that I feel like is connected to this is that, as you said, growers are connecting. They might be swapping plants, but they're definitely swapping information as well. And I was talking to my boss, the publisher, about this. I was like, gardening isn't a lone thing in so many of our lives. Like, we really do it on the solo. And so, but we love to like show pictures of our squash and, our shed or whatever. And I think that's what we're seeing too, is like that the ability to share seeds and knowledge is also about this community. And that was taken away from us for a long time.
It really was. I think that's one of the beauties of the internet. And I have a love-hate relationship with the internet, like most people. But, now that we have Instagrams and blogs and things, that we have seen that resurgence in home gardening because people can connect and talk about it and get ideas. And I mean, I wouldn't have the garden I have today if it wasn't for the internet, even though, like you said, the act of gardening itself is solo for the most part, which is beautiful and peaceful. But yeah, I love the both and there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just thinking about our cold weather gardening, are there any particular fruits or vegetables that may surprise people with their ability to thrive in those colder climates?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're seeing again is those hardiness zones changing. And so really taking a look at that, growers, trial growers, they love this, right? They're excited to bring new varieties to us. Hardy kiwi is something that does really well. And I have that in my yard. And actually, the Old Farmer's Almanac, we do offer some fruits and vegetables online, like through Walmart. And that's one of the ones that we brought to market this year because it does so well. And so, that variety has gained in popularity. And some other kind of native fruits, pawpaw is further north. Peaches are, there's varieties of peaches. Another thing that might surprise homesteaders is we have a great story coming out in our 25 garden guide about nut tree growers up on the St. Lawrence River in Canada. If they can do it there, you can do it. Heart nuts.
Okay.
Hazelnuts. Hazelnuts have gotten so strong that it's the first commercial nut in, I believe, Canada, in that region, that they're able to make a go of it because they can do so well. So we have a whole story about, it's a time to get a little nutty, but I think that will surprise people about those nut species that will do well in very cold climates. And you think they're all over Europe, right? Even colder than, where you grow. So
okay.
That's fun things.
Mm-hmm. I've never even considered nuts because I'm 5B here.
Yes.
Plus wind, plus whatever, weird weather. So nuts aren't even. My kids will be like, "What about walnuts?" I'm like, "No, we don't have any nuts here. We're nutless." So that's interesting. I actually, you mentioned St. Lawrence River, St. Lawrence Nurseries. I'm assuming you're familiar with them. Have you heard of that?
I'm not. Are they in Canada?
In New York, but they're way up. They're probably
on the river. Yeah.
But they're a nursery that specializes in cold hardy fruits, and trees and bushes. And so I'm hoping to have them on the podcast, but I order stuff from them, and there's such a wealth of knowledge and resources. But okay, so what zone are you in? Where you're at in New England?
I just moved from 6A, which I would say that some years it was 6B.
Okay.
To 5B.
Oh, so you're
moved an hour north. Yeah.
Okay.
But my yard I'm in a little city called Keene, and it's really warm. So again, no frost yet, even though it could typically would have been a little earlier than this.
Sure. I'm curious. I'm thinking about the cold hardy kiwi, which I want to go research because I wonder if that would work for me. I have a greenhouse, which
I think it would.
It's like a big cold frame basically, but it's still warmer in the winter than outside. So I wonder if I could put a little kiwi, something in there and experiment.
So the deal with the kiwi is you need a male and a female, and you can actually have one male to 3, 4, 5 females, but you need that to pollinate. And once they establish, after, they take 3 years or so to really establish, you get fruit. And they're very interesting. They're a skinless kiwi in that there's not the fuzzy skin, and they're small. They're the size of a grape. But they taste exactly like kiwi, and they have the green flesh with the little black seeds.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So now thank you, Carol. I'm going to go research kiwis and nuts when we get off the call. So this is great. I'm excited. Okay. Awesome. Very, very fun. Okay. So love that. And then I just love, your can-do perspective in terms of how we can adjust and adapt. I think that's so helpful, especially as folks feel those shifts. I'm curious, kind of pulling back out, just kind of big picture. I love talking about trends, especially in the homestead gardening space, because I've just been in this world for so long. I'm fascinated to see things shift and people's interests rise and fall. What trends have you seen as an editor and just as someone who's in this space, just in terms of what people are interested in or what people are excited about?
So a few things that are really, really strong. One is the desire to bring in pollinators and so this reattention, I would say, to that. And that's from agribusiness putting in pollinator, beds alongside of their gardens, to the home gardener really wanting to bring in the pollinators because they're so important to the environment. So people are feeling like this is something they can do in their own gardens pretty easily, and help out. And also it helps if you have any kind of plants that need pollination. That's a big trend. I would say a few things kind of come to mind as a lower level, like this idea of that technology can really help. Big farmers are using tech. They use robots that can pick things and know exactly the right time to get things harvested. We all know you have a bumper crop, and then you're like, oh gosh, I have to get all this in and actually get it used. And so this is helpful, right? So we know food waste is a big part of the food chain. We don't want to keep feeding, and so technology can help. They can tell technology can see when something's going to spoil, or that sort of an idea. And then soil is something that, again, a reattention to soil, building soil, no-till gardening was such a big deal. I would say in the last 5 years, people really exploring that. And then this idea of now, but what do I do to build my soil? So again, composting has always been the best way. We know peat moss is bad. We need peat for the carbon sink. And so what are alternatives? Really, they're making your own, and feeding your own soil. And so I think those trends we see, and then people just want really cool, weird stuff. Like they want, cucumbers they can grow on their patio or inside. There's a lot of attention to container gardening because it makes it more accessible for people. So you're going to see a lot of varieties that are little bush tomatoes you can grow inside, and cucumbers, little salad things, which is really fun.
That is fun.
One thing that made us laugh the past few days is that there's a glow-in-the-dark petunia. Well, yeah, exactly. We're like, we need that. That's ridiculous. That has nothing to do with sustainability, but must have.
There is those moments where I'm at the garden store and I'm like, this is frivolous, but I want it. I need this plant. Yep, totally. Okay, that's fun. I love especially the pollinator and the soil building.
Mm-hmm.
That makes my.
I knew you wouldn't like the technology, but it's
like
true.
It's okay, I'm using technology. People like to always be like, "You're such a hypocrite." I'm like, no, I embrace the paradox here. I badmouth technology, and I'm recording on a fancy mic with my MacBook. So,
right, but you're using a hoe that could have been designed 200 years
totally, and I like both. So yeah, but the pollinators especially. I'm so glad there's awareness there. And I do see more of that online as well, and I hope that continues because that's so important.
And kind of along with that, native plants, and people want things. We've been shopping local for our food, but now if we're going to put something in our yard, we want that to also, be from our area if possible. That's another trend.
Oh, that's so good. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So as we kind of get ready to land the plane here, let's say someone has never purchased the Old Farmer's Almanac before. They're getting their first copy this year. What would you recommend? They open it up, and where do they head in the Almanac to start using it to plan their gardens for the coming season?
Okay, great. I mean, this thing is under $10, so like we're not talking. And an almanac, I maybe didn't say at the beginning, is a calendar. That's the very, very basis of it. And so there's something in here for every day. It's feast days and tides and whatnot. The calendar section's like kind of the meat and potatoes, But to open it up, I think the features are really fun. There's the gardening on the moon, but the one that I've been having the most fun with this year is Snug as a Bug and a Hug. Doesn't really have much to do with gardening, except I saw a thing about bugs hugging. And then I said, that's cool. We've been elbow bumping for kind of too many years. Like, what's up with the hug? Is it going to have a resurgence? And then, there's a lot of science about hugging and how good it is for you. And so I like that story just because that's a surprise. And again, it's like kind of old fashioned, like it's almost a home remedy. A 20-second hug lowers your cortisol. Maybe you don't need high blood pressure medicine, just more hugs.
Right. Just hug everybody.
But if you're looking for growing information, I would go right to the best days. I think we have a history of tomatoes with some tips, but I think people who love their tomatoes, like your listeners and viewers, you'll be surprised at the history of the tomato.
I'm gonna go check that part out because I am rather intrigued by the history of the tomato because I am that much of a nerd. But yeah, that sounds fascinating. So,
not everybody liked it. Thomas Jefferson didn't grow it until 1806 or something. He was a very adventurous gardener.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay,
it was an odious fruit. It didn't catch on.
Okay, I guess that makes sense if you were. Yeah, I mean, when you know that it is classified as a fruit. It doesn't taste like an apple. It's not sweet it's not sweet like what we expect. So I can see that. Hard sell maybe at the beginning.
Exactly.
Okay.
This ain't no berry.
It is not. No, it's not. Kind of a surprise if you're expecting something else. And I know you mentioned, but you can basically find the Almanac grocery stores, bookstores, online, all over the place, right?
We are everywhere. Yes. And, for people that I get it, like, if you're cost conscious, go online and see what you think. We offer so similar things are the tools. Like I said, if you want to look up your frost dates or a 60-day weather forecast, we give that to you. You can just plug your zip code in, which is a great way to kind of dive in. But you don't get the feature stories and the farmers' calendars and the folklore and that kind of thing. You can find some of that online. But to just kind of jump in for gardening, you could just go to almanac.com and have a field day. Everything there, especially for beginners, even houseplant pet parents, we'll find lots of things there if that's your jam too. But that's a good place to start. And then, we're everywhere. We're, of course, on almanac.com and that's our shop, and then Amazon and Walmart. But we also really go deep. We go deep into, your neighborhood grocery stores and into hardware stores or places you buy plants. We're in those places too. So all kinds of places.
So almanac.com to start kind of checking out, playing around with some of the calculators and such. And then I know my audience, we all love paper things, things that can hold and touch. So I know a lot of them want to grab.
And we still have this little hole in the corner, which my nephew has a little horse farm in Kentucky, and he loves sending me a picture of it every year on a nail in his barn. But most people tell me that they have it in their bathroom. So I'm okay with that.
That works. I do love the nail. Like, that's cool to have the whole, that's a neat little story piece there. Okay. Love it. Thank you, Carol. This was so fun. I've been curious about the Almanac just, vaguely for years of its history and how it came to be and how you figure out the predictions. So this has satisfied that curiosity. I learned a lot. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.